The other thing I would say was just being able to, and I think this is true for any entrepreneurial endeavor, but being able to kind of balance the mental highs and lows. Like again, because there's months that are great and days that are great and weeks that are great, and then there's days you're just like, maybe I should just get a real job. I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe this isn't going to work, or maybe I made a bad decision. And there's plenty, especially like when I made the transition from being.
Hi guys, welcome to the Being Yourself show where we talk to the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success and have impacted many lives. If you're new here, then please do consider subscribing to this channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. This episode is being recorded in association with Let's Localize, an organization with a mission to foster micro contributions from communities and businesses to support the schools for their needs of time, skills, and money. To know more about them, hit the card above or the link in the description section below. I'm your host Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is an author, a speaker, podcaster, and an entrepreneur who has helped thousands of people build their own successful speaking businesses. And he started this from scratch. In last 13 years, he has spoken to more than 500,000 people in 47 different states in the US, with audience size as large as 13,000 people. He is regularly featured in media such as Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, and Huffington Post. His reality check program is being taught in over 400 high schools in the United States. And he has sold thousands of copies of his books, including the new release called The Successful Speaker. Please welcome the podcaster whose episodes have been downloaded over 6 million times, yet he calls himself as a normal dude, Grant Baldwin.
Thanks,
Welcome to the
AJ.
show, Grant.
Appreciate you letting me be here, man.
Thank you very much. First of all, tell us why did you leave your regular job to start something that you were not sure what it is going to be?
Yeah. So if we go back in time in high school, I was really involved with my local church, and my youth pastor had a big impact on my life, and it really resonated with me. I was like, I want to do that. Like that seems like a cool profession or a cool gig. And so I got into doing that, and I worked at a different church where I was a youth pastor, and there were parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't like. But one of the things I really enjoyed, and one of the things I had a lot of opportunities to do was to speak. And so I felt like I was decent at it, and I wanted to pursue more of it, but I had no idea where to begin, no idea what to do next. And so my wife was pregnant with our first child, and there's nothing like bringing a kid into the world that just causes you to question everything. And again, like I said, there were parts of my career at the time as a youth pastor that I liked, but there was a lot of me questioning, going like, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? Or would I rather be doing something different? If I was going to do something different, like what would that other thing be? And speaking was the thing that I kept really coming back to. Like, I really enjoy this. I really want to do more of this, but I just wasn't sure what that looked like. And in addition to 1,000 other excuses, my wife is pregnant, or I went to college to do this gig. And so there's plenty of other reasons of why I didn't want to do it, but I ultimately kind of felt like I wanted to give speaking a shot and feel like again, I had something there. I didn't want to, not do anything with it. I didn't want to get to the end of my life and be like, I think I could have made that work, but I'll never know because I didn't try. And so ultimately we gave it a shot, and thankfully it seemed to work out.
And when you look back, what do you think? What were your personality traits that helped you take that bold decision?
Yeah, I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. So like growing up in high school, I mowed a bunch of lawns in our neighborhood and was always looking for a way to make a dollar. I also have been very motivated and driven. And so, part of the challenge of being a speaker is that and an entrepreneur in general, is like, you're not guaranteed success at all, so you could have a month where you have a whole bunch of gigs and a month where you have no gigs. And so you have these big highs and lows. And so you have to be able to kind of balance that and continue to grind and to work hard to build, that business, whether that's being a speaker or whatever. So, The other thing I would say was just being able to, and I think this is true for any entrepreneurial endeavor, but being able to kind of balance the mental highs and lows. Like again, because there's months that are great and days that are great and weeks that are great, and then there's days you're just like, maybe I should just get a real job. I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe this isn't going to work, or maybe I made a bad decision. And there's plenty, especially like when I made the transition from being a youth pastor to trying to build a speaking career, like plenty of second guessing and doubts and insecurities and fears and worries and like all the same normal things that anybody has. And so I think a big thing that any entrepreneur can do is just learning to like mentally manage and deal with those highs and lows.
Yeah, that's quite important to manage those kind of situations. So, and then you ended up mastering the art of getting paid to speak, and then you created your own kind of blueprint, 5-step blueprint about how do you do that. So could you tell us a little bit more about those 5 steps?
Yeah. And so so I was speaking for several years. I was speaking full time and we got to the point where I was doing 60, 70 gigs a year. And then I was having a lot of people who were asking me saying, hey, I want to be a speaker. So how would I go about doing that? And I found that some people wanted to, speak full time like I did. And other people were like, I don't want to speak full time, but I'd love to be able to book a few gigs here and there, but I just don't know what to do. And speaking, finding and booking gigs is kind of this mysterious world. It feels like for a lot of people, it feels like you have to be, some big name celebrity, or you have to have conquered cancer or won an Olympic medal or something crazy like that. And the truth is like, it's not. You just have to have a process to be able to follow. And so that's really where I was at. And so I started teaching a couple people and they were seeing some results. And I was like, I really enjoy helping other people do this. And so then we really tried to solidify like what is the process here, how do you actually go about and finding gigs. And so if we wanted to teach this to other people, what would that look like? And so we came up with the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK, which is what we call the speaker success roadmap. And so this is what we teach people on how to find and book gigs. And so I'll kind of give you the high level overview and then we can dig in wherever you want. But yeah. The S is for select a problem to solve. So as speakers, as entrepreneurs, we're in the problem solving business. And so you have to be really clear about 2 things, like who do you speak to and what is the problem that you solve for that audience. And you want to be specific, you want to be clear on that versus saying like, well, I speak to people or my message is for everybody. Like you don't want to do that. You don't want to try to be all things for all people. You want to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. The second part of the process, so after select a problem to solve, the P is to prepare your talk. So get really clear on what is the solution for that. So this is where we get into how do you put together and present a great talk? How do you use, slides? How do you tell stories and the nuts and bolts of that? The E is to establish yourself as the expert. And so here we talk about the marketing assets that any speaker needs to have. You need to have a website and you need to have a demo video. You have to have these things in place to be able to communicate to other decision makers of who you are and what it is that you do and how you can help serve their audience. The A is acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part that people want to skip to. Like, that's what we want to do. I want to acquire, I want to book paid speaking gigs, but you have to have these other steps in place first before you get to this point. So acquire paid speaking gigs where you have a process, a plan versus just like, okay, I know who I speak to. I know what I speak about. I got a website and video. Now I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. Like that doesn't work. You got to be narrowed down and be really clear and focused on that. And then the last part of the process is K, know when to scale. So for a lot of speakers, they're interested in speaking, but they're also interested in, writing a book or coaching or consulting or doing any number of things. And so you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. So something's going to come first, something's going to come last. You've got to be really, really clear for you about how speaking fits into the mix. So again, that's kind of the big high level overview of what the speaker success roadmap, that SPEAK framework is that we teach.
So when you started, I believe, didn't know what your niche is going to be. How did you find that out? And how did you establish the expertise in that?
Yeah. So I actually felt somewhat clear on this. When it comes to those 2 questions of who do you speak to and what's the problem that you solve, most people are clear on one or the other. I know who I want to speak to, but I'm not sure what I would talk about. I know what I want to talk about, but I don't know who would hire speakers. And that's where most speakers are at. As a former youth pastor, I really enjoyed working with students. And so I knew I wanted to keep speaking to students, but I wasn't really sure, like, what do speakers get hired to talk to students about, like in high schools or student leadership conferences. And so that's where That's where I really spent a lot of time, like looking at other speakers and seeing what they were speaking on and trying to just understand like, what are the options and opportunities? And the other thing I would tell speakers all the time is when you're thinking through like who you speak to, what you speak about, you're not making a permanent decision. You're picking a starting point. And this is a part where it's really easy for speakers to overanalyze and overthink like, but if I speak to these people, I can't speak to those people, but I also want to speak to these people. And like, we just way overanalyze it and overthink it versus saying, I'm picking a starting point. And we tell speakers all the time, like, it's much easier to steer a car that's in motion than to steer a car that's in park. And so if you're parked and you're just overanalyzing, overthinking, like you're never getting anywhere versus like, when you're moving forward, it's easier to steer, to turn, to pivot, to course correct. And maybe I want to speak to this audience on this topic, and you're realizing maybe there's not a lot of opportunity. So I'm going to pivot and shift over here. But you don't know that if you're just sitting in park and not doing anything. So you've got to begin to get the ball in motion.
You know what? I loved that analogy about the car. And there's one more example you gave in one of your speech somewhere I heard about how far you can see when you're driving in the night.
Yes. Yeah. So the idea is like when I don't remember where I heard this, but it's kind of like driving a car at night. Like you can only see a few feet in front of you, but you can make the entire trip that way. Like you can drive hundreds and hundreds of miles in the dark, only seeing a few feet in front of you. So none of us have any idea what the coming, weeks, months, years of life look like. We are at the time of this recording, we're in the thick of this worldwide pandemic, and none of us if we go back 8, 10, 12 months ago, none of us thought like 2020 is probably going to be a bit of a mess, like none of us anticipated that, but like here we are, so you can only see as far as the headlights will show you. And so you feel like, well, I have to know, what the perfect topic is and what the perfect audience is for me. And that's what I'm going to do forever and ever. No. Like you can only see a few feet in front of you. So like do the next right thing that moves you forward towards that.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And when you started, how did you quantify your worth? So how much you think you're going to charge people and that people are willing to pay you? How did you decide that?
Yeah. So there's a couple different variables and factors that go into it. When someone asks, how much should I charge as a speaker? Like the reality is it depends. There's a horrible answer, but there are different factors and variables. So one is going to be your industry. You can charge more in some industries versus others. You can charge more speaking to corporations versus nonprofits. You can charge more speaking to colleges versus elementary schools. Now, I would never suggest that you just say, okay, where can you make the most? I want to speak there, because that doesn't work. When I was speaking, when I did a lot with education, did a lot with high school and colleges, there are certainly industries where I could have made more, but I really enjoyed talking with students. And so figure out what industries make sense for you, but recognize like there are different fee levels in different industries. Another variable and factor is going to be your experience. If you're a brand new speaker just getting started, you typically won't be able to charge as much as someone who's been doing this for several years and is probably just a better speaker than you. They deliver a better finished product. Another variable and factor is going to be your marketing materials. So going back to talking about like your website, video, like whether we like it or not, people judge books by their covers. And so you want to make sure that your stuff looks professional, your stuff looks sharp. It doesn't mean that you need to have spent tens of thousands of dollars on it, but it does need to look professional. So make sure that you are considering that and factoring that in when you are creating your marketing assets, that they need to look sharp, they need to look professional. But we also, and you may have seen this, Ajay, but we put together a free speaking fee calculator that factors in all these different variables. And so if you go to myspeakerfee.com, it's a totally free calculator. You answer a couple questions and it'll tell you what you should be charging as a speaker. So for anybody watching or listening, I highly recommend that you check that out. And again, that's over at myspeakerfee.com.
Definitely. I'm just going to put that in the description below also so people can actually have access to it.
Cool.
So you've started from scratch really, and then you've taken it so far. I'm interested in knowing what are your core values and how do you live up to them?
Yeah. So within our company is called the Speaker Lab, where we teach speakers how to find and book speaking gigs. And so we have 3 core values that we just operate off of internally. One is ownership. We really, really value ownership, and that you take ownership, you take responsibility about finding solutions to things. That is, I tell our team all the time, this is not just about me. I'm not the only person within the company. I'm not the only voice within the company. And so we really value taking ownership. Another thing we value is growth, both personally and professionally. We don't want to just stay still. We want to continue to grow and build and prove and who we are and what we're doing and how we're serving and helping students. And then the third one, our third core value internally is people. We value people. We take really, really good care of our team internally. We do our best to take amazing care of students that we work with. We really value people. And so we have to treat people accordingly. So those would be our core values of how we operate things here at the Speaker Lab.
Great. And like all the businesses, you might have had some turbulent time when you started. So what was your turning point in your business? And then you realized that, yeah, this is now going really well.
Yeah, I think like I was saying earlier, there's always going to be kind of highs and lows, mental highs and lows of being a speaker and just building a business in general. So I'll give you an example. I remember a couple of years ago, I live here in the Nashville area. And so I went to this breakfast for entrepreneurs, and there was a buddy of mine there. And I was talking to him, and he had had kind of a side hustle. It wasn't speaking related, but just had a side hustle for a little while he'd been working on. And the previous week, he had actually quit his corporate job to go all in on the side hustle. And so this was like his first week all in on his own thing. And so I remember asking, I was like, man, you did it. You quit your job. You're all in on the side hustle here. How do you feel? And I remember him saying like, man, I feel excited. I feel scared. I feel nervous. I feel anxious. I feel worried. I feel thrilled. I feel alive. I feel the whole gamut of emotions. Right. And I remember telling him, I said, listen, I've been self-employed at this point for 13, 14 years. I was like, that doesn't go away. There are days where like I was saying, like, I just feel like, whoo, man, we did it. Like we got it all figured out, smooth sailing from here. And then there's plenty of days you're just like, all right, that was it. Let's go be a greeter at Walmart or something like, and you just feel like everything's falling apart. Like, again, we look at things that are outside of our control. Take the pandemic and how that has dramatically affected, not like one little section of the country, but like the world, and especially speaking industry, where people are used to, for speakers to have a job means that groups of people have to get together, and like that can't really happen right now, or it's not supposed to happen right now, or to like a limited degree. So it certainly has had a huge impact where, the first few months of dealing with this, you're like, crap, like how is this going to affect us? And what are the long-term implications on the speaking industry? So those type of things, and just recognizing like, that's the stuff that makes entrepreneurship interesting. Like it keeps you on your toes, keeps you engaged versus just like, all right, we're good. We just go through the motions for the rest of life now. Like, I think that's boring. Like I think we have a very successful business today, but I also recognize like it could all fall apart. It could all crumble. So I want to keep pushing, that's why, again, we value growth and something that we keep, striving towards in what it is that we do.
Okay. And you've spoken a lot about, You've spoken a lot in schools and academic institutions, right? I just wanted to know, what do you talk about there? Is it a generic topic or something specific to specific audience?
Yeah, so I don't do nearly as much speaking in education as I used to. When I did a lot before, I did a lot with helping students kind of think through and prepare for life transition. So as high school students are preparing to transition into college, as college students are preparing to transition into real life and a career, and kind of thinking through some of that stuff. So that was a lot of what we did. Another thing that we talked a lot about with students was kind of that same core value that we have here within our company is ownership, and personal responsibility, that your life can be what you want it to be, but it's up to you to make it happen. And so don't wait on, a parent to solve your problem, or a teacher to solve your problem, or, someone else to swoop in and save the day. Like, you have the ability to make life great. So, so we did a lot around those topics.
And how did you inspire your audience to take action on whatever you're teaching them?
So I did a lot. A lot of times with speaking, I'll use a lot of stories. Use a lot of. I recommend a lot of first person stories, and so these are stories that I've actually lived, and I think that tends to resonate well with an audience, and also just giving them like some practical next steps of here's what you should do now. I think there's far too many speakers who they give a talk and the audience is like, that was good, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that now, and how am I supposed to think differently or act differently or do something differently. And so I always want to be clear, of what you want an audience to do as a result of a talk.
And you predominantly have given most of your speeches in the States, and now with your online programs, you're actually going global. What do you think are the difference in addressing a US crowd versus the rest of the world?
Yeah, like the majority of the speaking I've done has been in the U.S. I'm based in the U.S. A majority of our students are in the U.S. But I also recognize we've worked with speakers in I think 37 different countries around the world who've joined our programs and that we've helped and worked with. And so I certainly recognize like there are opportunities to speak all over the world. Now, you have to take a lot of the principles and ideas of what we teach and figure out how they may apply differently in your part of the world or in your culture or in your country or wherever someone may be. But I still know that like speaking is a universal thing. Groups of people gathering to hear from a speaker, a communicator, is something that takes place all over the world to varying degrees. And so there are always needs and opportunities for speakers all over the world.
And how's the current COVID climate has impacted your business, and what are your plans to come out of it?
Yeah, like so far, the first month or two was a little bit slow as we were kind of navigating that and making some pivots. But actually, the past couple of months have been really, really good. Been some of the best months we've ever had in the business. And so, in fact, right now we're on track to have our record month. And so, yeah, it's like you can't just stick your head in the sand and be like, all right, we'll just wait till this all goes away, So we want to, continue to serve and support speakers and help speakers understand like what do they need to be doing, how do they need to be thinking about this, and how do they need to be pivoting and adjusting given what's happening in the world. And so, yeah, so it's a crazy time, but again, it's part of what makes it interesting.
And going forward, there will be less and less physical events than more virtual events. So what do you think? Is it the virtual going to complement the physical events or the other way around?
No, I think it absolutely complements the physical. Like the truth is that virtual is a good, viable option, but I don't think it'll ever replace physical in-person events. Like people we love being around other people. Like there's nothing that replaces that. It's one thing for, you and I to be several time zones apart and in different parts of the world having a conversation like this. But if we were in person, like it completely changes things, and you can't replicate that through an online virtual setting. And so people crave that. And in fact, I know there was an event. I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and there was an event that happened here locally. It was a good size event. There was probably 1,000 people or so. And I remember asking him like, "Hey, how was it? How'd it go?" And he said, "You could just tell like people loved being around other people, and like you got to be cautious and be aware of taking precautions, but like people just love that, and people love." When we're somewhat back to normal, people love hugs and handshakes and high fives, and so we'll eventually get back to that. So I don't think things are weird right now, but I don't think that it's going to have any real long-term impact on the speaking industry.
So when you're giving a motivational speech online, how is the way to motivate people different online versus in physical setup, or it's the same? Does it matter?
Well, I mean, a big difference is going to be like you can't really play off the crowd so much, and you can't really see people's reactions. So much of being a speaker is seeing reactions. You're seeing people nod, or people writing, taking notes, or people smiling, or people laughing, or people like maybe they look confused or something. And so you're kind of picking up on some of those cues, and you're adapting your talk accordingly. So when you can't see the audience, it certainly makes it a little bit more difficult. So you have to rely more heavily on the chat as people are chiming in. You're having to like coach people through how to use the chat. So where someone may put in, a thumbs up or a smiley face emoji or something, just like so you have some type of interaction there, and you are acknowledging that like you are seeing them, you're hearing them, you're recognizing what it is that they're saying. Like those things matter. So it's definitely different, but it's not it doesn't mean that you can't still connect with people in a virtual setting.
And just before we went virtual, you were talking to students as well as corporates. So I just wanted to ask you, how do you prepare differently when you're addressing students versus corporate individuals?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is like your stories, your analogies are going to be different. So when you're speaking to a younger audience, the principles that you may teach, so if I was teaching on taking ownership, taking responsibility, like that's a principle that's relevant at any age. So whether you are a 17-year-old high school student or a 21-year-old college student or a 45-year-old employee, like you have to learn to take ownership and responsibility of your life. So that's true regardless. But how you go about presenting that, and again, the stories, the analogies, the references that you use are probably going to be different because what works with a let's say an adult corporate audience may or may not work with a student audience, and vice versa. And so you absolutely have to be aware of your audience and making sure that your message is tailored to them and where they're at.
What would be your advice to somebody who is trying to establish build a solo business such as yours? What would be your one advice to them?
Yeah. So whether you want to be a speaker, whatever it is that you want to be, one thing I'd go back to is that you have to solve one specific problem for one specific person versus like just trying to be all things for all people. So, here's a way to think about this. Let's imagine that, God forbid, that one of us had to have brain surgery. All right. You have a choice. You could go to, a local family medical doctor, and they went to medical school. They are a doctor. They may have done some surgeries before. They probably know more about the brain than you or I do, but they've never done brain surgery. Or you could go to a brain surgeon where like, that's all they do, like day in and day out, they do brain surgery, right? So if you have a broken arm, you don't go to them. If you have a bad cough, you don't go to them. If you got the Rona, you don't go to them. But if you have a brain issue, like that's who you go to. And so like, it's counterintuitive because we feel like, but you're narrowing yourself. Well, I can do more than just brain surgery, but like by just focusing on one thing, it actually makes it easier to attract the right type of clients and customers. I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, a couple houses down is a good friend of mine, our neighbor. He spends a ton of time in his yard, and his yard looks beautiful. It just looks immaculate. And I'm always just teasing. I'm like, dude, you're making the rest of us look bad, And so I remember seeing like an Instagram ad or something for some type of like yard fertilizer thing. And so I posted online, asked if anybody had known about this. Does anybody know anything about this? Does this work? And so a buddy of mine who lives here in town, he messaged me and said, hey, look no further. I got the guy for you. And so I text the guy, and he, all he does is fertilizer and just makes yards look good. And he's like, I don't mow, I don't trim, I don't do mulch, I don't do landscaping, I don't do any of those things, but I can make your yard look really, really good. And I was like, perfect. That's what I'm looking for. Right. Versus like a handyman who's like, yeah, I can, I can fertilize your yard, make your yard look pretty. I can also mow. I can also paint your house. I can also clean your gutters. I can clean your chimneys. I can also, and just like, can you really do all those things well versus just like, no, all I do is I can make your yard look pretty, or all I do is brain surgery, And again, it's counterintuitive, but the more narrow, the more clear, the more focused you are, the easier it is to actually attract the right type of customer. So like with the fertilizer, it actually made it much, much simpler for me when this buddy of mine says, hey, I've got the guy for you, versus like, I know a guy that I think could do it. I'm not totally sure if he does that or not, but here, you should talk to him. And then whenever I talk to him, he's like, yeah, this is all I do. Like, perfect. It makes the buying decision for me easier. And immediately I was like, yeah, where do I sign? What do we do next? Right. Versus like, it's one of 100 things that he could do.
Well, you actually have made it look so simple, but I know a lot of people who can speak, but they don't know what exactly they can speak about, and they just don't have proper tools to narrow down that choice, that focus. Mm-hmm. Do you use some sort of tools or something that you can give away here so that people can understand how to really find that niche?
The big thing that you need to do actually is you need to go pick up our book, The Successful Speaker. So 5 steps for booking gigs, getting paid, building your platform. Cause inside the book, we talk through in depth, how to go about doing that. One thing that I really encourage you to do, is to be aware of, there's a big overlap here between, what you are interested in, what you're passionate about, what you're knowledgeable on, and what markets and industries actually hire speakers to talk about. Because just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean anybody else cares. And just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean people hire speakers to talk about it. Or just because you're passionate about it or know something about it doesn't mean people hire speakers and pay speakers to talk about that. So you want to make sure that you find that overlap between, this is what I care about, but this is what people actually hire speakers to talk about. And so what's the overlap there? So, but I'd absolutely spend some time thinking through, your background, what you're interested in, what you're knowledgeable on, and start there. I think that's always a good place to start.
There's one question that I ask most of my guests is, what are the, let's say, top 3 essential skills that one requires in order to grow and be successful, but those skills are not taught in the schools or any academic institution?
One of them I'd say would being resourceful and figuring things out. I think that's a big thing. I think it's easy for people to just, I want people to tell me what to do or tell me what's next. And so a lot of it is just kind of figuring it out. Another thing I would say would be really trusting your gut and your instinct. Like I think paying attention to your intuition is a really underutilized skill for entrepreneurs, especially. Is just kind of the sense of like, it's hard to quantify, but I feel like we're onto something, or I feel like we're going the right direction, or I feel like we need to pivot, or I feel like we need to change, or I feel like this isn't going to work. Like there's several moments like that I can think of that have made a big difference for me in my own business and my career by just paying attention to my gut. Another thing I would say that's really important is networking with people that are in your space and in your industry. Like I think I've built a really, really good network of those in the speaking industry and just entrepreneurs in general. So being able to like, compare notes with people and talk with people and ask questions of people and get advice and to help other people, like those things have really gone a long way. So yeah, those would be a couple, I think, skills that come to mind.
Mm. And as I mentioned before, that this video is going to be played in some schools as well. So I want you to inspire the audience to take speaking as a full-time profession.
So, well, this isn't necessarily for everybody, like some people, my wife is a good example of when I go speak at something, she's like, hey, good for you. I have zero desire. If I called on her and said, hey, come on up here, like there's no chance she would do that. And so not everybody wants to be a speaker, and that's fine. But, if you feel like you have a message to share and you feel like this is something that you're interested in, for a lot of students, they didn't feel like that they knew that speaking was an option. I didn't see it on the menu. I didn't think it was a real thing. I thought it was just something that a couple people could do, or like we touched on, something that only a select few could do if you had a bunch of these prerequisites, if you had overcome cancer, or if you found a cure for cancer, or whatever it is. And so realizing they're like, no, if you have a message that to share to help people, that you can absolutely do that. There's opportunities to be able to do that through speaking. So you don't necessarily have to be a professional speaker, but there's certainly a lot of great opportunities to serve and help people if you are.
Of course, of course. And what are your future plans now going forward?
I mean, I love what we do now, and I love continuing to help speakers, serve speakers any way that we can. I think even bigger than that, I love being a husband. I love being a father. Like I love being an entrepreneur. I love what I get to do, but I love the role that I get to play as a husband. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I have 3 beautiful daughters, so it's me and a house full of women. It's the best, and so I love my life, and so I'm real happy with where I am and happy with where we're headed.
Wow, that's so interesting to listen to that. Okay, so finally, Grant, how can people reach you?
Yeah, everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. I know I mentioned myspeakerfee.com earlier, which is the speaking fee calculator. So it's totally free. Go check that out over at myspeakerfee.com. And one more time, I'll mention to you the book, The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and Building Your Platform. So make sure you go pick up your copy of that on Audible or Kindle or hardback. So wherever books are sold.
Yeah, I've read your sample chapter, and I'm sure the rest of the book could be interesting. I'm going to do that, buy it and read it. And I know that you have already sold thousands of books. Thank you very much, Grant. This was really inspiring discussion. We know that the speaking can be considered as a full-time profession, and we learned a lot about it. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Ajay. Appreciate it, man.
If you're looking to get into speaking as a paid profession, then please do consider looking at Grant's podcast. I'm going to put the link as well. He has spoken to so many industry experts talking about speaking and professionally speaking. So definitely go and check that out. And if you've not yet done so, then please, this is the time to consider subscribing to my channel by hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you next time.